it short. If you want to stay longer, it's also great. But the longest recording I did was 8 hours.
8 hours.
So it was a Christmas
I don't. I,
recording.
you'd be lucky if you get an hour of voice out of me.
Okay, that's great. Joe, it's good to have you on the show. And first of all, I would like to thank you. We had in the preparation now the chance to speak with Julie and also hear Michael. They did really a great job. Michael was on the front end. He was the contact person, and putting this together in just 1 week was an amazing work, so that I get all the answers I needed. A lot of help to prepare the questions. It's excellent. You have a great communications team.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear coming from you, and I agree. They do a fantastic job.
Joe, Bio is back in San Diego this year, and the last Bio was in 2022, and it feels like it was yesterday. It's amazing that already 2 years passed. What were your biggest takeaways from the last Bio in 2022?
Well, Christian, I think 2022 and 2024 are very different times in the world of biotech. Um, I mean, first of all, we held Bio 2022 in San Diego, but we also had planned to hold Bio 2020 in San Diego, and that turned into a virtual meeting for obvious reasons. We had a pandemic to deal with. So I believe it was the first time since 2017 that Bio actually came back to San Diego, which was kind of a long drought for us because I think if my count is true, and I go back to the first one in 2001, I believe we've done 6 of these in San Diego, all at very different times. My gosh, we did the one in 2009 in June, and then we had a recession 2 months later. Um, we did the one in 2001 in June, and then we had a horrible terrorist attack 3 months
Yeah.
later. And these things all had an impact on biotech and on the economy. But 2022, we were emerging from a pandemic. And we were, I think, in the middle of a very lucrative period for people who were looking for funding for their biotech companies. Um, it was happy times in 2022 in terms of the availability of capital and partnering opportunities. And I think that was kind of the theme of the Bio 2022 convention. Where biotech is back, the funding is great, and the opportunities are enormous. And we were, as we always are when we have the meeting here in San Diego, we're just thrilled to show off uh, everything from the great weather to the great people to the incredible biotech cluster that we've got in San Diego. And I think going into this convention in a few days here, obviously the funding markets haven't recovered. Things seem to be stabilizing somewhat. But one thing for sure that I'm optimistic about is that following on the excitement and the great experiences that people had in 2022 at Bio, that we'll have an enormous crowd back here in 2024.
How many people do you expect 2024?
I shouldn't begin to try to estimate the number of people that we'll have. But I'll just say I would love to see 20,000 people here. I think that would be great.
20,000. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think we approached that last time around. Now, look, I say that a little bit cautiously because the other thing that we know, and we see this because we're a similar association to Bio. One of the things that's happened with the downturn in financing in the markets is that travel capital for attending conventions and travel isn't as available as it was. So we'll see, if people are able to come here. But my guess is that they're going to find a way to come to San Diego.
Oh, I believe that San Diego is always worth a trip.
Yeah.
2020, traveling 2022 was really fun. We couldn't do a whole podcast on that topic, how it was the first trip after the pandemic. But let's stay with the bio. This year's theme is Converge.
Yeah.
What was the motivation to choose Converge as a theme for this year's bio?
I think convergence is the name of the game these days in biotech. We just held a conference called Converge last week ourselves. I think Bio maybe stole our name. I'm not sure. I'm only kidding. But we converge means a lot of things, right? Converge, first of all, in its very basic definition, means that we're going to have all these people converging together here in San Diego, in the one of the hot spots for biotech in the country, and people converging from all parts of not only the United States but Europe, the Pacific Rim, Asia, Australia, all over the world converging here in San Diego. But if you take it the next step, you can define converge as meaning that it's about convergent technologies. And that's what we're beginning to see happening in the biotech world today. I've been around in biotech long enough to remember when just about everyone who worked in biotech was either a biochemist or a biologist. We didn't have data scientists, we didn't have engineers, but now we're talking about things like rapid analytics. We're talking about AI and the applications of AI in discovering and developing drugs. And this was the topic of our conference last week. That was just an amazing group of people from the AI world talking to people in the biotech world. And so when we talk about Converge, I think we're talking about being on the verge of an era when science, especially biomedical science and artificial intelligence and other analytical tools, are coming together to create the potential for greater efficiencies and lower cost and better results for patients across the board.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I started in life science biotech in 2006, and nobody wanted to talk about artificial intelligence and the digital world. Almost nobody, except in the statistics realm. And now it's completely different. You have a long history working in pharma, biotech, life science. What ignited your passion for that area?
Well, it's certainly a passion was ignited in me, but it wasn't in the traditional way that a lot of people come into biotech, because my background was in public health, and I was working in a very large commercial company that made chemicals and other types of things like insecticides and fungicides. And what concerned me, because of my public health background and my major in public health was in environmental health science, was that there must be a better way to deal with some of the impacts on the environment that toxic chemicals are having. And so I began to research it, and I found that there was a company in San Diego that was developing recombinant protein-based insecticides that could be sprayed out on crops. They were potentially very effective because they were still working on them, and they would degrade within a matter of a week or two in the environment. And so my passion was for the environment, and I learned enough between my days in the federal government at the Environmental Protection Agency and at the chemical company to know that we needed to find a way to get away from using all of these toxic chemicals. So I came to San Diego to be a part of a company that was actually working in an area that was a little bit different from traditional drug development, but still very important, very impactful.
Yeah, it's not only drug development. Biotech can do much, much more.
Yeah,
What?
and in fact, the company that I joined here called Mycogen Corporation in 1988, within about 3 years, was beginning to acquire patents for inserting genes into crops.
Oh,
And,
really?
and so, we developed the first GMO crops that were insect resistant, corn and cotton. Of course, you know all about that. I had a fun time in Europe, especially in Germany and a couple of other countries, trying to deal with the authorities about getting those products approved. But again, it was a passion, and I think that I feel proudest of what we were able to do to put these genes into crops, and you don't have to spray insecticides on them anymore.
Yeah, let's stay with bio and with Biocom. When we start talking about European authorities, we can easily go to this 8 hours. Um,
Trust me, I don't want to talk about them either.
which year was that that you did this research?
We actually got the first approvals in the U.S. in 1995, but we began
Oh,
probably 3 years before that to do all the research, and 3 or 4 years before that to complete all of the dossier that we had to submit, do all the research. So we had to submit field trials and things like that.
that was early 90s, and then you decided to spearhead Biocom California. What motivated you to do this step?
Well, gosh, I came to San Diego in 1988, and it was as beautiful a town as it is now. The traffic was a little better than it is now, but it was actually absolutely a beautiful place. And in 1988, there was a group here that preceded Biocom. It was called the Biomedical Industry Council. And it was a group of very small number of early stage biotech company CEOs, including the CEO at the company that I joined. And they developed this organization that within about 5 years evolved into Biocom, for the purpose of being able to network with each other, just to get together and have speakers and hear from experts on topics that were important to them. And they also created the organization to advocate on behalf of this fledgling industry in San Diego, to advocate with our local politicians, because if you look at the history of San Diego, Christian, going back before the 1980s, especially, the economy was based on two things: tourism and the military. And so we didn't even have Qualcomm yet then. So we began to see the rise of biotech, and Biocom, which officially started in 1992. Biocom began to excuse me. Biocom began to have more influence in talking with the politicians at City Hall, and so I was with this company, Mycogen Corporation, where we actually gave Biocom its first home. So every day I experienced seeing the folks from Biocom. Let me take a sip of water here.
You're welcome.
And I got to know the people who were working in Biocom, and got to know what they were doing, and got to participate in some of their committees. And so eventually we sold our company, and that was in 1998. And so then I was asked to join Biocom shortly after that, and to lead Biocom, because Biocom was still a local organization. And the leaders of Biocom wanted it to have more influence in our state capital, and more influence in Washington, D.C. as well. And so what I did for our company was our regulatory affairs work, our government relations work. And so it was perfect to make that transition into Biocom.
This is a great story. And this was basically 1999, before the huge stock market crash in 2000, that Biocom started. And now we are in 2024. How did
Yeah.
Biocom evolve in these 2.5 decades?
Well, as I said, the first goal was to give the members of the San Diego life science community a voice beyond San Diego, a voice in Sacramento, where we had issues back then that we were dealing with, that we're still dealing with today. Research and development tax credits, manufacturing tax credits, that we needed for the industry. And working in Washington with the FDA, and with Congress. So we began to do that back then. And we did it with maybe 100 to 150 member companies at the most. We began to realize that if we wanted to have more of a voice, we had to grow beyond San Diego. But we were very partial to San Diego, and so growth beyond San Diego for us back then meant growth up toward Los Angeles, not even into Los Angeles, but growth up toward Los Angeles. And so Biocom began to evolve. We began to bring members up onto our membership roles from Orange County, just north of San Diego, and so that also gave us an increased number of members from the medical device community, which we also serve because Orange County has a large medical device contingency. We also began to look at how we could increase our networking. The networking that we did up until that point consisted of basically monthly breakfast meetings for our members. It was pretty primitive stuff. They were great breakfast meetings, but we would have 300 or 400 people come. But we knew we needed to do something beyond that. So we began to create things like our medical device conference, our annual partnering conference. And we also began to realize that it wasn't going to be enough to try to work from San Diego to get things done in Washington, D.C. You had to have feet on the ground in Washington, D.C. On a daily basis. And so that resulted in us deciding to open an office in Washington, D.C. and to staff that office with some experienced people from the Capitol Hill, from the regulatory agencies. And that's been a great success for us to have people in an office on the ground who can go to Capitol Hill, go to FDA on a daily basis. And also they can work directly with the representatives that our members have in Washington, D.C. And slowly, we brought on staff who could serve our members in those areas. But the biggest change came around 2015. And the reason for that change was that there was some turmoil in California around biotech associations in the other clusters. And when I say other clusters, of course, we know that San Francisco is a big cluster, but Los Angeles is a cluster as well. And so there were organizations in the different clusters, ours, and one up in the Bay Area, one up in Los Angeles. There was one that considered itself to be more of a statewide policy organization. And so we had some discussions with those other groups because we were interested in having more of a statewide voice. And unfortunately, those discussions didn't go anywhere. Unfortunately at the time. But fortunately, what happened after that was we decided that we should have a presence in Los Angeles, and that we should have a presence in San Francisco, and in Sacramento as well. So we basically took that breakdown in discussions about potentially creating a statewide organization, and we decided we would just go out ourselves and build a statewide organization. And that was a major change for us, beginning around 2015, and then that was in Los Angeles, and then by 2018 we were opening our office in San Francisco.
And you started from a local initiative, conquered basically the whole state, California. And now you, as I understand, or as I found in the research for this episode, you start expanding globally and also influence other ecosystems in the world. What work are you doing with the other ecosystems outside California?
Well, today we realize, and we've realized for quite a while as we've engaged in the effort to grow, that the California life science community, to be successful, has to have partners around the world, has to be able to enter markets around the world, and has to have the opportunity for companies around the world to come to California and create business relationships with them. So we began that entire effort with a relationship that we had already in Japan. It happens that San Diego and the city of Yokohama are sister cities. And so the mayor of Yokohama was visiting San Diego about 10 or 12 years ago. And we invited her to come and speak at one of our breakfast meetings. And afterwards, she said, I'd like to have more of a biotech relationship between Yokohama and San Diego. And Yokohama has some great research institutes and universities. Uh, at that time, they were beginning to create some biotech companies as well. So we thought that would be the ideal place to start. And we brought on a business manager to handle Japan for us. And that's grown significantly. Now we have relationships with the other two major trade associations in Japan, and with not only the city of Yokohama, but the city of Kobe, which has a very large biotech park and a lot of companies as well. We went from there to exploring opportunities in the EU, and created some relationships in places like France and the UK, and Sweden as well. Um, Not because they're huge markets, but because there's a lot of discovery work going on there that could potentially result in partnerships. And then beyond that, a couple of years ago, we began to look at a very hot market, Korea.
Mm.
And the Koreans told us that they actually wanted to come to California. They wanted to join Biocom. They wanted to learn from what we were doing in California. And also began to look at India. Uh, Not because there are a lot of biotech companies in India, but as much as the fact that there are a lot of contract research and contract manufacturing companies in India that provide an alternate supply chain for our members as well. And then more recently, about a year ago, I had the opportunity to begin to talk with the head of BPI, the German Pharmaceutical Association. And we decided that it looked like we had some synergies between our two organizations. And German market is a big market. And so we're creating a partnership now in Germany as well, and also Australia, where there's a very lucrative environment for conducting research with the government providing funding for that research in the form of rebates for the research that's done.
Yeah, that's good to know. Europe and I mean also Japan and Korea have solid research, basic research, early stage research. The thing in Europe is, and we're coming to the next part of the conversation, California's ecosystem. The problem that we have in Europe is lack of venture capital. Still, there are a lot of ideas, a lot of startup companies, and funding after Series A is next to impossible. So the logical step for a European companies like CRISPR Therapeutics, for example. I had the pleasure working for Rutger Novak when he spun out the company out of Novartis. Uh, they don't get funding here in Europe and need to go to the United States.
Yeah.
And what I am impressed with California, especially, is I mean, when I think back to the 90s, my personal memory is that I think Europe and the United States were even economically.
Yeah.
And roughly, so it was my perception. It's not statistically correct, probably. But after that, California just took off. And it looked like California is churning out one big company after the other, not only in biotech, but also in all other tech areas. And when I open now the internet, there is always a giga funding round. I read, I think yesterday, 6 billion Series B. We can dream of that in Europe. What's the secret sauce of California? Where does this success come from? It's outstanding. It's unique.
Yeah. For more than 150 years, California is a place where people come to take risks. It started with the gold rush back in 1849, and it hasn't changed. It's a culture that's been bred in California over more than 150 years. People who come here are risk takers, and they come here not just because it's fun to take risks. They come here because with great risk comes great reward, right? And that's sort of the culture. That's the secret. If there's a secret sauce in California, that's it. Look, I had a great job in Philadelphia. I made a good salary. I had a nice house. You know, I didn't have to come here to a biotech company that had no money. Basically at the same salary I was making in Philadelphia, where I had to buy a house here that cost 3 times as much. I don't say that because I want to talk about myself. I say that because that's probably a story that 300,000 or 400,000 people could tell you about coming here in biotech. Why? Because you're willing to take a risk because you know that there's the opportunity for that to turn into something significant and make a significant impact and make a significant change. And look, at the same time, you look at venture capital. These are people who have made a lot of money because they've taken that risk. A lot of them, and they've started companies or they've been a part of companies that have been successful. And if you look at here in San Diego, for example, if you look back 25 years ago, um, we had very few companies that were in the target of large pharma companies that were interested in what they were doing. And then we had almost a chain reaction. We had companies like Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Merck and Bristol Myers Squibb, and I could go on, who saw what was happening in biotech in San Diego in the way of cutting edge research and products. Um, a company called Agaron that developed Virusept for HIV and AIDS. Pfizer acquired it. And then Pfizer ended up having a presence here in San Diego. So some people said, "Oh, that's going to spoil our biotech culture because pharma is coming to San Diego, and pharma is a different culture." But nothing could be further from the truth, because what they did was they built their facilities right in the middle of where the biotech companies were, and so you had this intermingling of cultures, and that was good for both sides.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. What I don't find an answer to is, I mean, we also have in Europe the companies that you named. They also have a presence here in Europe, and they're also close to biotech. But whenever I look at a success story that started in Europe at some point, they relocated to the United States. One part you said is that it's a culture of risk takers. Uh, what other components would you identify? Culture of risk takers, money, you can get rich when you take risks in California, which definitely is not the case in Europe. What other parts are relevant?
Yeah, well, up until recently, I would say the completely open market for pricing and selling drugs here in the United States, right? And you know this, a lot of the large European pharma companies relocated to the U.S. because of the price controls in Europe and because of the more open market here. So I think a lot of biotech people come here with that in mind. Now our government is trying to destroy that, and I think it's very short-sighted, because we'll end up like Europe if they succeed, in what they're trying to do. But I think that open market for pricing, obviously. Um, and I say this all the time. If you ask, well, what's the secret? Well, the secret also is that we have more than 50 years of history of biotech here in California. You have to remember that it was the mid 1970s that companies like Genentech and in the case of San Diego, Hybridtech were being created. And so the other secret sauce is that we have a lot of people in California who um, are very good at attracting funding because they're serial entrepreneurs, and they've done this more than one time. Some of them 5 or 6 times, and some of them failed 4 or 5 times and then succeeded finally after that. But investors want to work with people who had that experience, and especially those who've been successful. And we've got that history of people here who have done that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, successful people also have a chance here in Europe, but when I look at the statistics, 9 out of 10 startups don't make it. So basically, there is a high failure rate. And when I look at the European culture, a failure means people are done. Basically, they are
Yes.
perceived as a failure, and there's no second try. And did I understand you right? That you said, I mean, in California, it's quite normal. I mean, you failed 3, 4 times, doesn't matter. You do the next thing as long as it's not fraud, like some famous companies. Uh, they're fine. Is it really so that a failure is accepted as part of the startup culture?
It's very much accepted as part of the startup culture. and it's accepted with some conditions around it. The expectation is that if you fail, you can sit down and write down on a piece of paper the things that you did wrong and how you would do them differently the next time around. And that's the secret to getting funded the next time around is here's what I experienced, here's what I learned, because there's also some scientific learning that comes along with that. Of course, when a company fails, it doesn't mean that everything that they did fails, right? They've got a body of research that they've conducted, and that could potentially be carried forward as well. But yes, the idea is learn. If you've learned from those failures and you have something positive to carry forward, then you deserve the chance to do it again.
Yeah, that's a great culture. You reach out to many ecosystems in the world, and I assume they very often probably ask the same question. Uh, and if you only could give them one piece of advice, when they ask you, Joe, we would like to have such a great ecosystem like you created in California, also in Austria, for example, or in Germany, or in Sweden, or anywhere else in the world. Uh, What's the most important thing that they should take care of at the first step to move towards building such an ecosystem?
Well, I can't emphasize enough what we just spoke about. Acceptance of risk taking is enormous, right? And look, it's not Austria or Germany or France alone. It's most of the rest of the world where if you fail, you're done, right?
Yeah.
It's that's the norm for the most part. So I would say that that's important. I think so that's my most important piece of advice. I think the next piece of advice that I have is um, create the training programs to have people who are very skilled at working in biotech. And those people are, the people are what's going to get you ahead. So, creating the programs, you can try to import the talent, but creating university programs to train people is really important. The other secret is you have to have not only the trained people, but you have to have the research. And look, there are great research institutions in Germany and in Austria and all over the world. But you have to be able to also transfer that research into technology, into the hands of entrepreneurs to be successful. And we don't see that happening in a lot of places.
When I look at the management teams, I mean, one difference that I perceived in the last 18 years was that European management teams of early stage biotech companies are mostly scientific driven. And whenever I looked at an early stage company in the United States, science played a major role. But on board level and on the founder level, I also saw that people with only business experience or legal experience are part of these companies. Did I get the right perception, or it was just my focus group too small? Is that really that way that business is honored as a skill in early stage companies more than in Europe?
Yes, I think that's true. And when I started here in biotech in the late 80s, early 90s, we saw that one of the challenges that existed was that most companies were started by scientific founders with no business experience. And what ended up happening was if they had a technology that looked like promising, that like it could be moved forward, eventually a business person was going to have to be hired to run that company. The science person didn't have the background in business to be able to do it. Um, so, the thing that impresses me more than anything these days is that people are being trained in across disciplines, right? So we have people who have business training, but who also had a little bit of a science background as well. Uh, and the CEO doesn't have to be the guy who can explain everything in the utmost detail on the science, but it sure helps to have a little bit of a background in science. And so I think that's the evolution, is that we've got a lot of people now running biotech companies, and we've got cross training programs here in San Diego at UC San Diego, where people can get combination degrees in science and in business at the same time. And I think that's a successful way to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Um, Venture capital. This is, I think, an interesting point. You mentioned Genentech, and I remember from the Genentech story that the initial seed funding was $100,000 in the 70s. When I now look at the internet, I mean, we had the $6 billion Series B round, amazing, mind-blowing. But also when you look at the seed rounds in California, I think it's 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, and it seems to grow every year. Uh, where does this capital come from? Why is California so attractive for venture funding?
Well, look, I think first of all, it's just the sheer magnitude of what we've got going on here that generates all that venture funding, right? Um, a lot of it is just the fact that we've got a lot of people who are turning over companies and then have the ability to turn that into venture funding, and a lot of exits that result in the venture funds making more money as well. So it's kind of a well-oiled machine that kind of fuels itself and its growth. I don't see a lot of venture capital, and I don't see many venture capitalists from outside California coming and establishing themselves in California, to be honest. I think it's most of it's organic growth here in California.
Really? This is so it's basically homegrown since the 50s.
Where does it come from?
No, it's basically homegrown. So it's basically
Yes, it's homegrown. It's homegrown, and it's a result of successes. And
yeah.
many, we've got thousands and thousands of biotech companies in California. And we see activity all the time around those companies being acquired or sold, or um, you know going through an event that generates a significant amount of capital that can then be reinvested. It's just a huge machine.
And it keeps growing and it keeps delivering and it attracts a lot of talent from all over the world, which I think also helps developing then the talent base in California. So it's a machine that's just working. It keeps working.
Yeah, yeah. I mentioned Los Angeles, which is still kind of a fledgling biotech cluster, although it brings in more research dollars from our federal government for bioscience research than down here in San Diego. But we talk about California and venture in California. Well, the problem Los Angeles had a few years ago was that companies would be formed, and then all the venture capital investment was up in San Francisco or maybe down in San Diego, and so those companies would get to a certain stage, and then the venture capitalists would say, "Well, now you need to move out of Los Angeles," and so Los Angeles just wasn't growing until one of the venture capitalists up in San Francisco, who happened to be from Los Angeles, decided to move back and start a $500 million venture fund in Los Angeles to fund Los Angeles companies.
I mean, from the Austrian perspective, it's just California. So is this really so local venture funding? Still in 2024, that venture capitalists from Los Angeles like to invest in Los Angeles, venture capitalists from San Francisco like to invest in San Francisco, and from San Diego, the VCs like to invest in San Diego. Is it still so local?
I think I think venture capitalists in California like to invest in California
Mm.
is the best way I can put it. You know, Fortunately for us down here, we've got a pretty mature biotech industry, so we're able to. We don't have an enormous amount of venture capital present in San Diego, so our companies are able to attract a lot of that venture capital from the Bay Area, and to some extent from the East Coast as well, Boston and other places. Uh, but I think for the most part, the venture capitalists here in California will just invest in California. The venture capital people in San Francisco tell me that they consider San Diego to be basically in their backyard. Um, now I did say, that one of the things that happened in Los Angeles was that companies would get to a certain size and they'd have to leave. But that was a different reason. That was because they didn't have the mature talent to take the company forward. So the venture capitalists would say, now you need to move where the talent is.
That's good to know. It means for companies from Europe, when they want to be attractive for venture capital funds in California, it would be a smart thing to do to open an office in California,
Yes.
somewhere with
Yeah.
people working there.
Yes. And I think as I mentioned, we're very impressed with what we're seeing in Korea, where the Korean biotech companies in partnership with the Korean government are saying, we know that our companies need to have an office in California. And I don't see that from too many places.
Nope, I can agree. I can agree, but it's necessary post Series A for European companies. So the main story is take a trip for 2 months to San Francisco and hope that I attract the VC, and then I fly home with the money in the suitcase and invest it in Austria, and they don't come looking for the company. That's not exaggerated, but the solid advice is if you want to be attractive to VCs in California, open an office, start working there, be part of the ecosystem, transfer part of the company to California, and the VCs are likely to invest if the product is good, if the team is good, to grow the American story.
Absolutely. And look, I'm not going to be shy about saying the added benefit is the organization that I run that's been around for 30 years now and provides the access to capital and provides some of the help with working with the government agencies and has an arm that works to get people trained to work in the industry. And you know, the number of different conferences and events that we have that both give people more knowledge and give people the opportunity to create partnerships with others.
Do you have a program at Biocom um, where European VCs and European entrepreneurs can talk with people from Biocom or get a training at Biocom on how to raise funds in the United States and how to start a business and office?
Well, we haven't gotten to that stage yet, but we have a meeting that we've done for more than a dozen years called the Global Partnering and Investor Conference that takes place at the end of February every year here in San Diego. And my charge, because one of the things that I focus most on in my CEO role is our international relationships, our international strategy. My charge is to get more of the companies from outside the US to come to the Global Partnering and Investor Conference because it's a great opportunity for them to seek funding, to hear from experts, to create licensing partnerships as well. But I think that the next important step is to establish an office here because we do have programs, one that we're just launching in San Diego, where CEOs can come and be around other CEOs and learn from them.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. So everybody who listens to this episode should reach out to Biocom if they want to do something in California and participate in your events and get access to the ecosystem, direct access.
Absolutely.
When we switch the conversation, when we move to Bio, it's coming to San Diego. It's only a few days next week. Um, can you give an overview of what to be expected in this year's Bio?
Well, I think there's some interesting topics this year, right? You know, we've had some interesting developments within our government with regard to relationships in China, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion around that. You know, the security of not only the security of our genetic information, but the security of our supply chain, and going forward. And so it's not. I don't expect that it's going to be as much of a political discussion as it's going to be um, for all of the people who come here an opportunity to look at alternatives, right? Where else can they go? Who else can they work with? And look, we'll see a huge delegation from Korea. We'll see a delegation from India. We'll see delegations from across Europe. And so, you know, I think one of the things that I think is going to happen this year is that companies are going to be here searching for secure alternatives that they can turn to for manufacturing, for research, for API, for other kinds of things that they can't be solely dependent on China for, right? Um, so I think that's going to be a very important discussion. And I think the other thing that I'm looking forward to at this meeting is that we begin to look at how we can use these new technologies to create more efficient drug development processes. We've talked about it for a long time, but I know that there's going to be a lot of discussion at this meeting on AI and analytical tools as well. But the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is there's a little known fact that each year that they hold bio, they get something like 50% turnover in the attendance, new people, right? And so new people coming to San Diego, new people seeing what we have here in San Diego, and I look forward to meeting those people and to talking to them about why they should be here.
Yeah, 20,000 is impressive. 15,000, I think, was the announcement last year for Boston, and then afterward, I heard it was 18,000.
Yeah.
It keeps growing and growing and growing, and also the presence of global organizations is pretty impressive. I saw, I think it was on Tuesday, that there is a global biohub showcase with a lot of European biohubs, Asian hubs, and also other hubs globally. When I turn the question that I asked you before a little bit around, is there also something that California, that the biotech industry in California can learn from other ecosystems?
Yeah, I think there is. I think one of the reasons that we even began this international program is that a lot of biotech companies in California, especially the early to mid stage ones, uh, don't have the ability to gain exposure to these other clusters around the world. And so I think one of the benefits of having bio here in San Diego is that companies in San Diego don't have to go to Europe, don't have to go to Asia to begin to know the people in those biotech clusters and to begin to potentially create relationships with them. Great science exists all over the world, and so when we talk about what can our companies learn from Europe, uh, they're potentially going to learn about science that maybe we don't have here in California.
Proper regulation.
Yeah, yeah.
There was one part that I really liked in the program. Uh, I think it was, I don't know, I think 10 years ago or 12 years ago when I heard his speech the first time, where he started with why it makes sense to make your bed every morning. And
Yeah.
it's Admiral McRaven. And I love his speeches. Navy SEALs, you have in San Diego, I think, is a huge base of the US Navy. What was the motivation to invite Admiral McRaven to Bio this year?
I think it's the same thing. Um, as I said, there's turnover in the attendance. Um, he's also a national security expert, so maybe there was a little bit of motivation around some of the challenges with China right now in having him come here. I think people are going to be interested in hearing that. But I remember that presentation they made about making your bed every morning. And I think it's important for people in the industry to hear that message because as I said, I when I came here from a large pharmaceutical company, one of the reasons that I left was the bureaucracy and the processes and everything else. But then I got here and I realized that a lot of biotech companies were just kind of the Wild West. Uh, just kind of come to work each day and decide what you're going to do, what you're going to discover, which is great, right? But you need a little bit of discipline too.
Yeah, that's true. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. I really like when in startups when I see a pinball machine, I say, okay, it's a place to
Yeah,
work, not to play.
yeah.
When we look at convergence, and we talked a little bit about artificial intelligence at the beginning of this conversation, can we dive a bit deeper? Today, I read on the internet that which I heard also with the internet, beginning of the internet in the 90s. I think then with blockchain and Bitcoin was the same. And now with artificial intelligence, people think sometimes or exaggerate it in a way that people will be replaced. Artificial intelligence will take over all our jobs. Drug development, for example, could be fully automated. How do you envision the future in biotech with artificial intelligence? Do you believe it's possible at one point in time that some robots and artificial intelligence does all the hard work in drug development, and you just need to push a button, and at the end of the day, we get new drugs without human intervention?
Christian, I don't know if we'll see that in my lifetime. When I think about the scientific accomplishments and the progress that we've made just in the 30 years that I've been in biotech, I can certainly not sit here and say, oh no, I don't think that'll ever happen, right? Uh, I I would never have dreamt that we could sequence the human genome and do it as quickly as we can now, right? So but at the same time, artificial intelligence, at least right now, is only as good as what you program into it, right? And then it can do the calculations. But I remember having this conversation back 25 years ago when robotics came into play in drug discovery, and all the scientists were going to be replaced by robots, right? But that's not the case. The scientists are sitting at a laptop, um, controlling the experiments and looking at the data that's coming out of the experiments. The people are going to always have to be involved. But look, the bottom line is that I think as we've made progress in technology over the years, we've not just talking about this field, but we've replaced people, and then we find a different opportunity for them somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I think as an Austrian, maybe I can say that you also replaced the governor of California with a robot with Arnold Schwarzenegger. He played 1984 Terminator.
He's great. He was a big supporter of the industry.
Really? Really? What was his work in that area?
I think more so than anything else, realized he's a business guy, right? Not just an
Mhm.
actor, but a business guy. And he realized the value of what we were doing. And up until that time, state government did not have anybody uh, who was strictly focused on helping the biotech industry to succeed. And so he actually created an office to work with the biotech industry, uh, to help them have greater access to his office, greater access to the offices in the state capital. He came to Bio at least once, maybe twice, and
Mhm.
spoke at Bio. Our current governor has no interest in coming to Bio, and that's not been true on every governor, but this governor doesn't seem to take what we do, uh, the value of what we do seriously.
Yeah,
But
I mean, sorry to
Schwarzenegger
interrupt.
did.
Yeah, it's also a great success story. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger grew up in Austria and really had big success in the United States. And I think this is also possible thanks to your ecosystem that you have built, that such success stories also for foreigners are possible in the United States.
Absolutely, he took a risk coming here, right? We started out as a bodybuilder, but one thing led to the next.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, as you mentioned, I mean, he supported biotech and helped your industry also thrive in California.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, when we've got an initiative here that has created our state stem cell agency, which altogether, uh, since its inception in 2004, has been funded at around $8.5 billion to provide grants for stem cell research. This was in 2004. This was what we call a citizens initiative, which basically means that you can place things on the ballot in November for people to vote on if you can get enough petition votes to have it placed on the ballot. And then, if it passes, it becomes law. And so you circumvent the legislature. But in 2004, he was governor and he supported the stem cell initiative back then.
That's great. What would be the ideal collaboration between governments, the public sector, and biotechs? How would it look like?
It has to be a collaborative relationship between the two. And this is one of the things that more recently I felt that where our state government has fallen short, right? Uh, we have a $415 billion biotech industry in California, and we have not one individual in the governor's office who's focused on giving it international attention, focused on helping it to raise money. None of that do we have any support from our governor's office at all. It's a shame because it's such a shining part of the economy, and one that we could not only brag about, but could through a partnership with government, could help it to be more successful in other parts of the United States. Could even draw companies here to California from other parts of the United States. And we don't see that happening. But I think where we see government and industry working closely together, more on a local level, right? Economic development, building biotech clusters, building biotech facilities. There has to be a good relationship there between local government and the biotech companies to get those facilities permitted and to get them built. So I think that's important. I think the other thing is the relationship on the regulatory side has to be one of collaboration. And at our AI conference, I heard a couple of people say, FDA is your friend, and FDA is enthusiastic about working with you. And of course it is. I used to be a regulatory person. When you bring them exciting things, those people get excited. They're not just sitting there being bored to death day in and day out, with nothing to do. They want new and exciting things to look at, and so you give them that. Obviously, you have to give them the assurance that those products are safe and efficacious. But government has a role in helping to advance new healthcare technologies and move them into the hands of patients. And the industry should have that partnership with government.
Joe, it's fantastic talking to you. I just had a look at the clock and we are already 1 hour in the conversation. I really loved it, and I remember that your colleagues mentioned that you have some meetings afterwards and that we have 1 hour today. Before I ask my final question, is there any topic that you would like to address at the end of our conversation?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered a lot.
One final question to this year's Bio for the fun events. I remember 2022. It was on the aircraft carrier.
Yes.
And then surprisingly, it was a great party. And surprisingly, I think at 10 o'clock, Kool and the Gang played on the carrier. That was completely unexpected that you have such a great fun event also planned for Bio. What are the fun events this year that people can expect when they come to San Diego next week?
Well, I think one of the fun events that we're doing is a concert ourselves that will be behind the convention center in a brand new facility called the Rady Shell. It's going to be first come, first serve, limited attendance. But it's going to be we have a band called the World Band that I play in that will perform. So we've got musicians primarily from Japan and from here in San Diego in the World Band. So we'll do a little warm up, And then we'll have a concert with a group called the Plain White Tees, who were pretty famous during the 90s. They had a big hit called Delilah. And so that I think that'll be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that San Diego is worth a trip. Great city, great biotech industry. Joe, thank you very much for your time. I enjoyed our conversation very much. Thank you for making it happen on short notice. We had only a few days to prepare that. And let's catch up soon and see how biotech industry in California evolves.
Thanks, Christian. I'll look forward to catching up soon, and I've really enjoyed the conversation with you today. Thank you.
Joe, have a great day and have a fun week next week in San Diego at Bio.
Thanks a lot. I'll look forward to it.
Bye
Bye-bye.
bye.